Nora Speaks is a weekly podcast that tugs at the soul and consciousness of the Black community. With show topics such as youth empowerment, education, women's impact, and civic engagement, Nora Speaks challenges the listener to not only join the movement, but be the movement. On the show, you'll learn from insightful guests who have demonstrated capacity in these fields and more, and I'm your host, Nora Muhammad. Welcome to the show. Welcome to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast, and I am your host, Nora Muhammad. Thank you again for joining me in this episode of the podcast, and it's always a wonderful opportunity for me to know that I have listeners who are looking forward to the show, who return week after week and are interested in the content that is shared on this platform. I do not take it for granted. I know there is so much other content, so much wonderful content. And for me, that's one of the great things about podcasting. One day I'm going to do a show soon, actually, about what I believe is the importance of podcasts and podcasting and the ability that we have to disseminate messages. And what I think our responsibility is in that. So you can look forward to that in a later episode coming soon. But I really take this seriously. I take what I do seriously in terms of coming to you week after week and being consistent with the show, working to improve my skill sets, my knowledge base, so that when I am publishing a show, that listeners know that I have invested my time, I've invested resources into producing the best content that I can with a goal to continue to improve. So, as my intention is to tug on the soul and consciousness of the Black community, each time I sit down to record an episode, I think about why I started this podcast. And I'm serious. Each and every time I sit to record, I think about, Nora, why did you start this podcast? What is the goal of the podcast? What can listeners expect when they listen to the podcast? Is the messaging consistent? And even deeper than the message, is the intent still there? For me, when I am producing content for my people, it is important that I do it. And I think this is applicable for everyone. I believe it is important that we do it with the absence of ego, without necessarily being self-exalting. And, in some ways, in many ways, we must be self-promoting. I have to promote this podcast. And in so doing, I have to promote myself and who I am, but not to exalt myself above my people. But certainly I want my listeners to know who I am. I want my listeners to understand my passion and my heart for this work. But when I press record, I want the message that is resonating to not be one where I am necessarily overly critical and condemning of others. And as I said, exalting of myself. I don't believe that I have all of the answers. I believe that the answers do exist, and I do my best to source them through my own research, or certainly to source them through guests that I bring to the show who have been effective in addressing issues that our community continues to face. And it is, for me, a ugly thing when folks condemn or put down our community because we lack information or because we don't know. I do believe that what we don't know does hurt us, because when we are lacking information, or when the truth is withheld from us, when education, a good education, is withheld from us, when training and skills, when we're hindered from gaining them, then that does produce deficits in our community. And I believe many of our communities, our homes, our contributions to our community, they're limited because of those deficits. So for me, I want to be able to engage with my audience, those bits of information, tools, resources that we can access so that we can fill in those gaps. Or as I said, bring in guests who can help fill in those gaps so that we are not operating insufficiently. And so that is, just sharing, what comes to mind for me every single time I press record. And I do a personal inventory every single time. I think about, what the listener is receiving every single time, because I value you so much and because I value your time. And so as we are in an election year, and it is a heavily political election season, we're going to be seeing a lot of folks throwing their hat in to campaign for political office, whether that office is national, on the national stage, the state level, our local levels, including, like PTA or your assembly person or, your senator or congressperson. I believe that it is important that we understand the nature of political engagement. And I know so many of us say, oh, I don't get into politics. I'm not interested in politics. And when I hear people say that, it occurs to me that they don't understand politics, because politics is in everything that we do. Every single thing that we do, there is politics. And so if I could give you a definition of politics, or, how I see it, the politics is simply engaging with other people with influence. You're trying to influence or persuade someone to your way of thinking. They're trying to influence or persuade you to their way of thinking. We're leveraging relationships. If someone's running for political office, then they have to open up, right? They have to open up who they are, what their platforms are, and help you understand why they're the better candidate for the role, and possibly why the opponent is not the best candidate for the role, the office, or the title of the position. So everything that we do in some way is going to involve politics. There's politics in our households. When our children are seeking access to either our finances, they have to give us an argument, right? Or if mom doesn't comply or acquiesce, then they'll go to dad, or they'll ask mom to convince dad, right? That's politics. That's using influence and leveraging relationships to achieve a certain goal. There's politics in your school systems. There's politics in the textbooks that our schools receive. There's politics at your job, right? For someone to be the manager or the supervising manager, then you're leveraging relationships. And sure, decisions of promotions, can be heavily based on skills or aptitude, or in some case tests. But there's also politics because you're still selling yourself or trying to promote yourself. There may be 3 top candidates that scored the best on the test, but of those 3, somebody has to be selected to be the supervising manager. Often, for the work that I do, and I have to deal with relationships. And in a leadership capacity in some ways, but for me, it is not for me just to tell people what to do. It's to explain why I think certain actions are necessary. That's using influence. If there's conversations that have to go beyond the room, then we have to talk about, well, what relationships can we leverage to get the outcomes that we desire? That's politics. So politics really is in everything that we do. The FDA, and what drugs are going to come to market. There's politics involved with that. So we have to first understand that politics isn't everything, and that politics, it doesn't have to be a dirty word if we don't operate in a dirty way. And so I think that if we don't understand the nature of politics, then our behaviors as we are campaigning or engaging in the political system or withdrawing from the political system. I have to say that our local politics impact us to an extent that can exceed the national level, right? Who is going to be on your school board? Who is going to be the leadership in your PTA? Who is going to be the local legislators, in the assembly? These people that are creating bills, looking to forward bills that are going to impact our local communities, ordinances, your city council race, right? What's happening in your town, in your neighborhood. These things matter because they're going to impact us every single day. Who is your sheriff? So I don't want us to become frustrated or disengage because it may just seem overwhelming. If we just break it down and understand that politics, it's relationships, leveraging them, using influence, and also understand that we do have and can play a major role in what's happening in our communities. And so often what happens is because we become frustrated, because we disengage, then folks don't find us, how can I say this? Folks don't take the time to interact with us in our communities because they know that they are not going to be speaking to a large voting block, right? And if you're not voting, then they have to move on to the people who will vote, right? Because they don't want these people voting against them. They want these people voting for them. So they have to go to the people who vote. Now, I know that there are campaigns to encourage people to get out and vote, to register to vote, but don't just register to vote, but also vote. And because we become disenfranchised, or we think that our voice or our selection in the voting booth doesn't matter, especially in the local level. If we think that it doesn't matter, then we are not voters, and we're not that population that politicians or those who are running for office can spare the time to engage with. So if we want to be able to force these people to come and answer to us, then we have to be those people who are engaging with them. I know people say, well, they don't come to our communities. They don't come talk to us. Well, they will if they know that you vote, because then you have something that they need. But if you are not a voter, you see, I'll say this again. If you are a voter, then the person running for office, the candidate, wants your vote. If you are not a voter, then you don't have, or you're not participating in the process that can get them elected. So let's get engaged and participate in the process, even if that's starting going to your school board meetings, going to your city council meetings, finding out what the issues are, going to your freeholder meetings, your county executive, when your county executives meet, going to these meetings, seeing what the issues are, because there are going to be issues that are going to, like I said, impact us directly. And if we don't have a voice in the room, and if we don't have a vote that someone can, that someone's seeking, then we're really, we're just not being counted. And, I've heard people say that if you're not being counted, then you don't count, because you're not being counted. And because you do count, I do want our people to get into the voting booths and vote, make a choice. And I'm emphasizing local, because what is being decided locally happens when we are selecting our local candidates. So support your local candidates, ask them questions, challenge them, and just in general get involved in the process. And so for those among us who are going to find themselves as candidates during this election season, for me, I think it's important as well that we understand that when you are running for office against another person, then you have an opponent. You don't have an enemy. And often just in my local community, and I've seen this nationally, where we see someone who is an opponent as an enemy, and it becomes it can become a personal, ugly matter. And so I recall once I was at a campaign event, and I noticed that there were people who were supporting the other candidate. And as the campaign event is going on, and the candidates that I was there with, while they were speaking, I was observing those folks who support the other candidate. And I could see them becoming visibly frustrated, angry, uncomfortable. And I thought, I think this person has the wrong impression of what this process is. There was no conversation about the other candidate. There was no derogatory remarks made about the other candidate. These candidates were there campaigning and just expressing why they thought they were the ideal person to hold the roles in those particular offices. And I'm watching these people become upset, and I just thought and I'm talking about we in the Black community, we often have a very immature view of politics and campaigns. If you're running for school board and you have someone running against you, it's not because they hate you. It's because they want the same office. They want the same role. And they believe that they're better qualified or suited for it than you are. That doesn't mean that they dislike you. That doesn't mean that they or undervalue you. That doesn't mean, that they hate you. That doesn't mean that they're thinking derogatory things about you. It just means that they want the same office. So they're your opponent. They're not your enemy. And if you are running for office, it's important to recognize that you are going to be criticized. That doesn't necessarily mean that you should be defamed, or your family should be defamed, or you should be slandered, which we know that happens very, very often in politics. And that's so unfortunate. But just because you're running for political office, you should not have the expectation that you're going to have personal attacks. But I would say expect criticism and be prepared to answer questions. If someone is asking you a question about your platform or about your history, don't take that personal. You are the one that's seeking their support, and you're seeking the opportunity to serve these people. And so they have a right, and they should ask you questions on your history, your voting history, your platforms, the kind of legislation that you would support. They have every right. They want to know, what are you going to do for them to hold them or to be accountable to them? And so they have every right to ask these questions. Don't take that personally. And then, just talking about the kinds of attacks that some people engage in. I think it's unfortunate in this political process that conversations do devolve into slander and gossip and scandal. And, I know that, our current president is someone who engages in name calling and slander and things like that. And I will say he has done the things that he has been accused of, because he's admitted it, and he was still elected into office. So just because someone has a bad reputation does not mean that they won't be selected or elected, however you want to look at that, into office. But in general, when you're engaging in slander and innuendo to diminish the reputation of your opponent, well, just remember that people should be looking at you to think about the kind of public servant you're going to be. So if you're on the campaign trail and you're slandering and using ugly language or hostility towards your opponent, then the people that you serve are not always going to agree with you. So how are you going to handle them if this is how you're handling your political opponent? What you do on the campaign trail can have a very serious translation into what you're going to do if you are elected into office. So think about that as well. Think about the kind of servant you want to be and be that on the campaign trail. Let the people know who you are, why you're running, and what your goals are once you're in office. And certainly, if you don't think that your opponent is qualified, there's a way that you can talk about that too. But I would just urge those who are throwing their hat in the ring to, seek a political office to move with integrity, maintain your dignity. We don't have to make things ugly and personal, because think about it. The person that you could be defaming, if you win, you're still supposed to be serving that person too, if he or she is of your constituents, right? So that person is still someone that you would be serving. So, treat everyone with kindness. And I don't mean to woo, but just be a decent human being and expect the treatment that you want for yourself. Expect that from other people and then give that to other people. So I hope that we have a more mature view and approach to politics and campaigning. The high school kind of name calling, that kind of stuff, I hope that we don't see too much of that. Every time, the political season comes around, I just get nervous because I know how we react. And sometimes we react badly. And there's so much misinformation and disinformation. And so for all of you who are running to serve our community, now remember, we do black on black crime in so many ways. We do it with guns. We do it with knives. And we also do it with words. And we don't need to do that or engage in that on the political campaign in that process. We can have our differences, but our differences don't have to be so great that we are attacking each other. And so just adding another point to that, I believe it's always something to be mindful of is that we don't attack people, but we attack principles, or we attack platforms, but we don't attack other people, right? It is not the person that you are, that you should be attacking. It should be their platform. It could be their voting history. It could be their theories, right? But not the person. I just want us to kind of elevate our game and step it up so that as our children are watching, and I say this so much, especially when I go to certain board meetings and I see the adults in the room just acting so vile and immature, I think our children are watching, right? And if we want our children to engage in the political process, to engage in a democracy and to be involved, I hope that we're teaching our children to treat others like you want to be treated. And if we're not doing that, we're not being an example. Our children learn by observation, not just manipulation. There's also observation. And a great deal of their learning is through observation. And so we should be modeling for our children what they should do and how they should conduct themselves. So remember, the attack or the argument is against the principles or the policies, but not against the person. Let's step up our game. Let's mature our view on elections and campaigning and the entire process. And still, no matter what, be brothers and sisters first. Don't continue to let processes or people or parties, for that matter, divide us as a people. We can be a family, right? We can still be a brother and a sister, even though we disagree on policies, even though we disagree on procedures. We can still be brother and sister, and we could just have a different route that we take to try to solve the problem. But that doesn't mean that we have to act hateful to each other. The world is watching us act hateful to each other. And so if we are acting hateful to each other and disunited with each other, no matter our political sides or our political disagreements, the world is watching us. And if we're not going to be brotherly to each other, no one else is going to trust us, and no one else does trust us. I have to be honest with you. So maintain our character, maintain our dignity through this process. I hope we come out of it with our dignity and our character in place. And I hope that these words that you've heard on this episode of the Nora Speaks podcast speaks to you and is a reminder and an encouragement, to one, be involved in the political process. Even if that's you running for office yourself, even if that's you attending meetings and making your voices heard, if there's an issue that's up for discussion and you have a thought about it, express that. The people who are in leadership or who are in office need to hear from you too, because your voice does matter. So one, get involved. And as a citizen or as a candidate, and if you are a candidate and if you are involved, then be intelligent and act intelligent. If you're getting involved and you're a private citizen, then when you too are questioning these folks who are running for office, these candidates who are running to be your public servant, even when you're questioning them, also with them, act with integrity. I have been in community meetings, local meetings, state meetings, and I have witnessed ugly conversation from citizens to their elected officials. And so I say, no matter what position that you're occupying, whether you're a citizen, private citizen, whether you're a candidate, or if you're someone in office, always operate with integrity. You are not going to like all the questions that you receive as a candidate or as a elected, but operate with dignity. You as a citizen may not like the policy. You might not like the legislation, but still operate with dignity. Make your point, say what you need, ask your questions, and be firm, but always operate with integrity. So I want to thank you for listening to this episode. If you are running for political office, I would love to hear from you. You can email me at nora@noraspeaks.com. If you're running, I would love to hear from you. I would love to know what it is that you want to do to serve your community. Because if you are running, then you are seeking to be a public servant, right? You're looking to serve the people. So I want to know how or in what way you want to serve your people. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, stay in peace. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Nora Speaks podcast. Be on the lookout for a new episode coming at you fresh next week. And as always, if you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, visit my website, noramahammed.com. Or if you have a listener question, email me at info@noraspeaks.com. You can also follow the Nora Speaks podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Nora Speaks Podcast. I'll be sure to include links in the show notes. If this show has value to you, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share it with family and friends. And be sure to check out previous episodes. And remember, don't just join the movement, be the movement. Stay in peace.